Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to be starting shortly. I'm going ahead and do my thing right now and make sure that all the other spaces are working. So if you're on Facebook, let's see, how's Facebook looking? And on Facebook, so we're live on YouTube for sure. That I do know. And Facebook, we're going to refresh right there. And I don't see Facebook. I do see LinkedIn. So good evening, everyone. This is Uche and Joker. Welcome to Sneaker Principle Podcast. And as usual, I was trying to make sure I had everything working before we started so we just jump into tonight's topic. But of course, as usual, technology is doing its thing. Well, in the interim, as I, check everything and make sure everything is working properly, let me go ahead and ask you, if you're here right now, do me a huge favor and share the link that you're using right now so we can get a broader audience in tonight. I would really appreciate that. As of right now, what's going on with Twitter? I have no idea what's going on Twitter here. Okay, here we go. So Twitter's working right now. And I see we're on Twitter. The only space right now that I have no idea what's going on with it is Facebook. I'm going to check one more time and see, and I don't see it. Facebook, you're playing with my emotions again. And let me check one more thing here. There's a space I can go in here and check and see this. Maybe it's happening somewhere else. And let's see. Let's go ahead and refresh that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, like Facebook stresses me out so much because, and here it is. Now I'm here. I think the only problem is that it says live right now, and I know it's what I'm wearing, but I often wear black T-shirts, so sometimes it can get a little confusing. Okay, enough with that. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sneaker Principle Podcast, and as you can tell from my post earlier in the day, and even the post for this evening, I am working on exercising my creative rights. So, what does that mean? It means that here on the Sneaker Principle Podcast, I am going to be constantly playing with different ideas. Because for a long while, I was kind of like sequestered while I was working for the university, for the New York City Department of Education. I was very cautious about what I posted, what I spoke about, because of course I work for a system. I didn't want to ever be critical, and which limited the amount of voice that I had in those spaces. But I don't work for the Department of Education anymore, and nothing I will ever say is going to be, oh my God, damning, and like I'm going to come at them. But the fact of the matter is, I have the ability now to speak about school systems across the country, across time, across the world, because that's the space that I've been living in for almost 2 decades. So for me, it's very, very important that I share my experience with you, whether you're an educator, whether you're a parent, whether you're an administrator, whether you're just thinking about the possibility of going into education. Or maybe you're just somebody who is concerned about the state of education and what it means for our children. So with that, I'm definitely going to be exercising a lot more of my voice and my experience in this space. I want to say good evening to Brother Solomon. Thank you so much for being here. Listen, this is my day one ride or die right here. I think he's on almost every time I go live. So I appreciate you, Brother Solomon, and my love and respect to your wife and your child. Hopefully everybody's well. So what's going to be happening is, moving forward, every other week on Sunday night, I'm going to be alternating between two platforms, or two show topics, not show topics, but two shows. One is going to be Public School Confidential. That's what I'm calling tonight. And this is really about talking about everything having to do with schools, my opinions, my thoughts, my experiences, and hopefully I'll be able to get you into as part of the conversation as well as viewers. and that's something that's very, very important to me because, again, it's no fun if I'm the only one talking here. So as you can see, scrolling through the screen right now is the link to jump on, and I'm going to leave it. I want to leave it here on, and also I'm going to have the green room open. So if you want to call and join the conversation, but just do know one thing. I'm going to try my best not to keep stopping and going and pull people in conversations. So I'm going to do my talk, my say so, whatever the case is, and at a certain point I'm going to let you know I'm taking in callers. So if you call in ahead of time, if it's appropriate, I might let you on, but if not, it's probably going to be the last half hour or 15 minutes of the show that I'll open up the dialogue, depending on how much I get through this evening with the content. But it is open, and again, it's tinyurl.com/calltsp. You call that number. You put that into your web browser. It will bring you to a site where you can put your name in, and if you want, you can be anonymous. You keep your camera on, you can keep your camera off. I also want to make sure that my ability to speak freely doesn't hinder you if you're an educator or you're an administrator and you're like, I want to be part of the conversation, but I don't want to get in trouble. I totally get it, okay? Because again, at the end of the day, you got to feed your family. But I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to be spitting facts, and it is what it is. It literally is, it is going to be what it is. And so let's jump into it. So this is the deal. As you guys know, if you've been following me, I am, like I said earlier, almost 2 decades. Actually, I always say 17, but it was actually 18 years because I spent 1 year in AmeriCorps as a social work intern in California at Carson High School for a school year. And that was me just doing something to strengthen my resume. And then years down the road, I did go into education, and that's why I'm here right now. And so it was really 18 years. So an 18-year veteran, and now I'm no longer officially working within school building. I'm no longer working for a school district, but I do work in education technology. And because again, I'm passionate about technology, and I always want to be able to contribute to this space because there's a lot at stake when it comes to educating our children. So check this out. I'm a father, had kids a little bit later in life. I'm in my 40s, and I have a 4-year-old and I have a 2.5-year-old. And my 4-year-old, she's still at home. She's still at home. Didn't do the pre-K thing yet. And it was really more of a matter of happenstance because of the where I live. There's a lottery, and there's a very small window to get into the lottery. And I'll be honest with you, totally missed it. But I wasn't really tripping. Yes, I want her in that school space socializing. Because she's a tremendous social butterfly. But there's other ways. But thank God there's other ways for her to get that socialization in. She goes to dance, and her mother's been really good about making sure she has those types of activities. But I am concerned because 5 is approaching really soon, and she's going to have to start school officially. At least that's the rules of society. My son is 2.5 years old, but he's not far behind her. And it's funny because in talking about schools, I have not given public schools a serious consideration. It's been like the distant last place, like just in case there's nothing else. Even with that, it would still require finding a space that I completely trust and has an incredible track record that's undeniable. So pretty much what I'm saying is that as I stand right now, I would not put my kids in public schools. It would have to be the school would have to be an outlier. It would have to have incredible data, an incredible leader, incredible teachers that I would have to meet all their teachers and see their track records and feel 100% confident that my child will be safe, will be nurtured, and be groomed, and I'm talking about groomed to be an amazing intellectual being. Okay, and I have to say that, and because again, we're going to get into this. There's a lot of grooming happening in schools that I'm not for. I've seen grooming happening within schools that I've led that I've had to talk to teachers about. I've had parents who have come to me because their child is being groomed, which led to me having to deal with situations that I never thought I would have to deal with as an educator. This is a problem if you think about it. Because how am I a 18-year veteran of public education in 3 states? My 1 year in AmeriCorps was in California. I spent a year in Las Vegas as a elementary school assistant principal, and I spent the rest of my time in New York City. So I've literally done 3 states. I've seen pre-K all the way through to 12th grade. Actually, 12th grade plus, because I did work in a college in an early college school where our students took college courses. And then I also worked in the IB school, International Baccalaureate. So I've seen the possibilities of what could be in schools. And I'm still not satisfied or confident in putting my child in that space, or any of my children. And that's a problem. So let's get into it. Okay, but I was thinking about this, and I was like, let me break this down. And this is why this is called Public School Confidential. Because a lot of this stuff is stuff that, people don't really talk about, but they feel it, but they don't talk about it, or they don't question it. And these are some of the things that a lot of educators do talk about to each other, but it's done behind closed doors. Okay? There's one thing, before I start, I'm gonna tell you this. One thing that is a fact. The majority of teachers that I've come across, school leaders, their kids do not go to the schools that they work at, unless they work in an incredible school, in an incredible community. But usually no. So you have school leaders and teachers who teach in schools that they would not send their kids to. And how do I know this? Because I am that principal. I am that guy. In some cases, I've been called a butthole for asking this question to my staff. Because there's been times when there are things happening in classrooms or instruction happening in classrooms that I was completely not happy about. I was completely pissed off by, because I saw level of instruction that was so low or so inconsiderate, absent of high expectations. Then I had to ask teachers, wait a minute, I know you have a kid. Would you be okay with your kid being in this classroom that you're teaching? If it wasn't you teaching this and there was the same instruction and you walked in and you saw this, would you be okay with that? And 100% of the time I've always gotten no. But also I've gotten no's that were like no's with kind of like this weird, like, okay, no, but my kid doesn't go here. Which terrifies me. Because as an educator, I took an oath. Maybe it wasn't an official oath, like a Hippocratic oath that doctors take, or the oath that lawyers take, or the oath that I took when I enlisted into the Marine Corps. But I know I took an oath myself that said that I would never, ever, ever, ever do anything in any of my schools or accept anything that wasn't the highest order of what a parent would expect for their child while they're under my care, either as a teacher, as a dean, as an assistant principal, as a principal, even if I was just a custodian. Your child comes into my building, you can expect that your child is going to get the best, the absolute best that we have to offer. And if our best is the worst, we will recognize that and find ways to fix it. That was the reality of what I swore to. And I'll tell you this, over the course of my career, there are people who I mean, again, based on what I've been told, there are people who respected me and were like, man, you really stood by your standards for what you expect from students, from teachers, from parents, even from my own leaders, my superintendents, what I expected to be able to run a good school. And when those things didn't happen, I'll be honest with you, I was hyper emotional about it. Because at the end of the day, I always felt like a child in my school was the greatest responsibility given to me. Especially seeing the majority of my career, I didn't have my own children. And I think I'm worse now. I'm actually worse now that I have my own children. But okay. My diatribe is going too long. So I have my notes here. I'm going to look at my notes and I'm going to stop. So the thing I want to start off with is my whys. And there's so much more, but these are the whys that I wrote down earlier today. The why of why I'm not sending my children to public school. First thing is safety. I'm not worried. Listen, we live in a time frame where people are shooting up schools. This crazy. It's crazy. It's almost to the point where we're becoming numb to it. We see it happen, and we just be like, "Thank God it's over there and not here," And but safety is something important. It's very, very important. But I'll tell you this: I'm least worried about something like that happening than the emotional, physical, spiritual, intellectual safety of my child while they're in school. I don't want my child being bullied by students, by teachers, by administrators. I don't want my child being made to question who they are. Because the adults there have other agendas. They are not part of the curriculum, but they have their own personal politics and their own personal belief systems they want to pour into the children in their classroom. I do not want that as well. I need my child to be under my worldview and my protection until they're old enough to make their own decisions for themselves. Okay? So safety is very, very important to me. The security of the mental, intellectual, and spiritual health of my child is very, very important to me. And again, this is something that I fought all the time. I talked earlier about grooming, and I'm not going to go into any details, but I don't want to distract from the topic I'm talking about tonight. But I've had teachers who've done everything from bring their own. I mean, you're teaching science or you're teaching English language arts. There's a curriculum that's already been established and everything else. Then teach that. But I've had teachers who've taken the time out to go into their own diatribes about religion, but not like comparative religion. But I'm talking about like letting the kids know this is what I believe and this is why what you believe is wrong. Okay, I've had teachers jump into the whole entire woke agenda, the hyper woke agenda, whether it's about gender, sexuality, whatever it may be, and go into the spaces where I've had parents call me saying, as a principal saying, what's going on in this particular classroom? That my child came home saying things that I didn't even know how to address because that's not something that we're ready to, as a family, to talk about yet. My child is too young. But clearly this is happening in this classroom. Is this part of your curriculum, part of the instructional agenda? No, this was a teacher purely just espousing their own belief systems, And I've had the same thing happen around race. Teachers making comments or whatever the case may be, like crazy, and it's not like we like our schools in America, or at least in urban settings, or even like in New York City, are these monoliths. Where you have this homogeneous communities where you can say, well, I can talk about this because we all believe the same thing. In one classroom, you can have. If you have 30 kids, you could have 30 different cultures in one classroom, hands down. And with that being said, it's when you start to espouse your own belief systems, whatever the case is, and you're not being considerate of, first of all, you shouldn't be doing that. But when you do that and you're not, I'm not going to say considerate, you're not thinking, I'll give an example. I had a teacher who was talking to a student about coming out. And again, I understand. But this teacher told a child, you should come out to your family. Because this is 2021. You should come out to your family. The family needs to know who you are. The problem is this. This child comes from a very, very, very traditional Jamaican family. And thank God there was another teacher that this child went to and said, hey, this is what the teacher told me to do. And this other teacher said, do not do that. If let's get the guidance counselor involved. If this is what you want to do, we could put things into place to help in the process. But to go home and say, because Miss So-and-so told me to come home and tell you guys this, there's so many things can happen. Over the course of my career, I've literally had students who've been kicked out of their homes, who've been brutalized because things were not handled properly. So I've always been hypersensitive. Like, you got to be very careful about what you share and what you do in the classroom. Okay, the classroom is not your stage to preach your own belief systems. That's something that's something around safety that's very, very important to me, right? That I need my child to be safe. Historical academic outcomes is another one. Okay, historical academic outcomes. And I'm sorry, I just realized I didn't state the topic of this podcast. I don't think I did. And the topic, again, if you saw the thumbnail, it says public schools are failing Black children on purpose. Okay, so now this connects to historical outcomes. We have schools that have gone 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of having marginal outcomes, if not below. I mean, talking about way below average outcomes. And unfortunately, most of those schools tend to be Black schools. And I've never understood that. I've never understood it. Because again, and we're talking about some schools that they've thrown money at it, nothing has changed. They've said we've sent coaches and the best of supports, and nothing has changed. And my thing is this: I know for a fact that because I've worked seven, 8 schools in total, 7 schools in total in the course of my career, and I've seen schools who had the worst numbers make incredible gains, in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years, but progressively move towards closing that achievement gap within their walls. But in those cases, I worked for very clear-minded principals who were willing to get fired. I mean, literally, I remember the mentor principal that I had who told me, this work is so important to me, I'm willing to be fired. I am willing to be fired if I'm wrong. So I will do whatever it takes for these children to be successful. But these type of leaders are outliers. So you have these schools that have horrible outcomes. And right now, think about this. Nationwide, literacy and math proficiency scores are I believe, at their lowest in 30 years. They are at their lowest in 30 years. That terrifies me. If I send my kids to public school, what does that mean? My son is 2.5 and he's reading. My daughter is reading. Because they grew up in a household of an educator. Their mother, she's not an educator, but she definitely pours into them. We have a text-rich environment. They're as quick to pick up a toy to pick up a book as they would a toy. My son is territorial. He has his own books. That when his sister touches, he'd be like, "No, my book." Okay, because that's the space that we've created for my kids. My fear is they go to school and they go to the wrong school, and all those gains they have will be reversed. Because the schools have this crazy idea, and I get it, but I still don't get it, because not the whole entire world doesn't work like this. If you're 5, you can only do this content. If you're 6, you can only do this content. But what happens when my son, who's 2.5, gets to kindergarten? And he's reading entire books, because that's the goal. He's going to be reading entire books. Do we now say, "Oh my God, he's so abnormal, he has to be homeschooled"? Why does it have to be the case? But again, these are things that does bother me. So the other things are systematic low expectations, teacher quality. I'm going to say this. In the course of my career, teacher quality. It's let me put it like this: 5, 10, 85. 5% of teachers I've worked with in my career have been, 5% have been like I'm talking about beasts. Teachers that were just, this is who they were. God gifted, like academician. My mother says academicians. She uses this old school term, but they were. This is what they did. They were amazing teachers, able to engage students from the beginning of the period to the end of the period. to the point where some of their students, I've seen them years after down the road, and they're adults, and they still talk about that teacher. There was a teacher, and I'm going to say her name, Miss Ben Parat, who, when I say in her social studies classroom, man, I remember one morning, I'm doing my rounds, walking around in the morning before the kids come into the building, and I'm hearing gunshots. And I'm like, what's going on? It was loud. I opened the door, I looked in there. She had her smart board playing like war sounds, right? And the lights were turned off, and she had trash bags, like kind of like going between desks and on top of desks. And I looked around, I'm like, Miss Bumperall, what's going on here? And she was like, I'm recreating, she was recreating, it was an English class. She was recreating foxholes from World War I. But the kids were going to be reading letters from soldiers, written by soldiers while they were in foxholes. And I said to myself, God damn, talk about a way to imprint learning into a child's mind. And these were 8th graders. Like, she took the time out, and this is a big classroom, and she bought the trash bags and the lights and everything else, but she wanted them to sit between the desks and feel what it felt like to be in the dark and have all these sounds, shots and bombs going off 24/7 as you're trying to write a letter to your family about what you're going through. Incredible, 5%. She was a 5%er. Then there's those 10 who are just ride or die solid. Like, they're consistent, consistent. These are the ones who are like, I'm in this for the long haul. This is what I do. This is what I do, right? Then the other 80%, it's a job. It's a paycheck. It's that simple. Right or wrong, it's a paycheck. And that concerns me, because I've led schools with those 80%, and every school has the 80%. It's just that depending on the leader, depending on the environment you create, you can get those 80% to be relatively effective. But a lot of schools that are failing is because 80% of their teachers, it's just a job. There's no difference between them working at school or them working at McDonald's. And I'm telling you, I've seen this. I've had this conversation with teachers. And I've had teachers who told me, like, okay, what do you want me to do? And the problem is that I'm not saying I'm a 5%er, but I'm definitely a 10%er at minimum. And for me, this was never a job. This was my work. This is like when God says, a man should not eat unless he works. Like, you tap into your purpose. And we have a lot of teachers who are not that. And not only that, I'm going to be honest with you, we have principals who are in the same boat. We have 80%ers who find their way because of the pay and everything, and they become principals, become assistant principals, and you have that in those schools. That concerns me. I don't know, I don't want my child in that kind of environment, because it's too much of a potential they're going to lose out. Okay, so I said teacher quality, leadership, the achievement gap is only getting worse in a lot of schools. There's a need for individualized attention for students that's not happening. We have classrooms of 30 kids or more. There's no way possible you can really support an individual child. Students who have students with disabilities who have IEPs, individualized education plans, even those kids don't get fully serviced the way they're supposed to. They have a lot things that are checked off on lists. They're checked off on lists, and compliance things that are done for them. But I've only worked in the very few schools where you can say that those kids who have IEPs, who are special students with disabilities, that have 5% teachers who were like, my kids are going to learn. My last school in the Bronx had a teacher who's still there she was a 5%er. She moved her kids. And she moved her kids out of special education. But she was like, that's my job. It's not just to keep you there, but for you to advance out of it, right? So, let me see, I said that, and the other thing too is, the other why is there isn't a real financial investment by school systems to recruit and develop real talent in education. We're not putting money into human capital. We're not putting money into finding more of those 5%ers. Because think about it, when you look at it that way, and I said 5, 10, and 80. And what I meant was in the whole entire school systems, not even just particular schools. Some schools have that, but it's a lot of schools that are just 80%ers, period. And I'm talking from the principal to the assistant principal, all the way through to all teachers, all 80%ers. It's just a job. I'm not going to send my child into those spaces. Let me go through the comments real quick. I see here, Brother Davis is back this evening. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Comments are agreed, all aspects, emotional, spiritual, intelligent. Many kids have identity issues. Yeah, that's why it's very important to not just throw whatever you believe at children. You know, they're still in the space of processing, and I really believe that your family members or a counselor are the best people to help work them through those spaces, not just throwing them, you know, whatever you believe, without understanding their own their particular cultural background, where they're coming from. You know, often we approach spaces as Americans and not understanding that America's a construct. Under the layer of America is the actual individual cultures. We are a melting pot, but we're not really a melting pot. We're more like a stew, you know? So yes, the carrots are there, the peas are there, the potatoes are there, the meat is there, but it's not a puree. It's not just mixed where we're all the same. So you have to consider what you say to the classrooms and how they could be detrimental to the child and the families. The biggest problem, you're trusting your kid with valuable time, good, bad, indifferent. I knew it. Gender should not be discussed in school. And let me see here. Kids don't know the value of education learning because the parents are not involved. So, and you know what though? I'm gonna touch on that next. You know, the whole notion of parents not being involved. Kids need to put down phone, tablet, reading, writing. Kids don't need a grade. They should be learning faster. Low expectations, agreed. 5% teachers are solid. Okay, so thank you for that contribution. So check this out. Parental involvement. The number of parents that are not involved is a very, very low number. Very, very low number. I'm going to tell you this right now. I would even say with parents is the other way around. About 5% of parents are just, no, don't call me. I don't care. I've had those parents who said, I've had parents who tell me, if you fucking call this number again, I swear to God, we're going to have problems. Don't call me. Don't call me. Over the course of 18 years, maybe I can count them all in one hand. And so we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of kids, all in one hand where I've had that parent, you know, that 5% parent. So it's a reverse, right? That 5% parent who's like, no. Then there's that 10% parents who are just like, I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. I am just completely disengaged. I don't know what to do. 80% of parents are there, and within that 80, there's different tiers. But 80% of our parents want to be involved. They are involved. But when you're poor, and you're working 2 or 3 jobs, I've had parents who said, listen, I can't come to parent-teacher conferences. I can't come to that meeting. My job, if I don't show up, I get fired. They don't care. I got to keep a roof over myself, my children, and my children. You know, I've actually had a parent who told their boss, you know, I got to go to the school, and she got fired. So she's sitting in my school, and I am feeling torn because I don't want to take one problem and turn it into another problem. Her child's acting up, and I was like, we need to meet. You know, and the mother was like, you know, I got to come because this is getting too much. But she got there. She's like, she looked at her son and said, you know, I just lost my job. And I don't know if I'm going to find another one. So she's in tears. The young man he's started crying. And the thing is, what's going on there is trauma and so much more layers of things happening. A lot of our families are just in situations that are just impossible. They're literally just impossible. You know, and it's a responsibility. I always felt it was my responsibility as a school leader, as an educator, to find that middle ground. You know, the fact of the matter is the way society is set up, is very, very simple. And I'm sorry, I think it was John D. Rockefeller and all his rich buddies who were part of the establishment of this public school system who said, we do not want schools to create thinkers. We want workers. Think about that. The power that be, the political power that be, that said, let's create a public school system. The purpose was to create workers, not thinkers. Why is that relative to this conversation? Check this out. If mom, who just lost her job, is a product of the system that was intended for her to become a worker, who's she working for? If not the John D. Rockefellers and those types, those company owners who are only concerned with productivity of the company. Which means school was created with two intentional folds. The first was the kids need to go somewhere and be watched over, babysat, so that the parents can go to work. But while they're there, we want to groom them to become what? Workers. So the system is not meant for you to be involved in your child's education. It's not. I just read an article, and I think I mentioned it a couple of podcasts ago. It was a Wall Street Journal or Washington Post article. It was an opinion op-ed, opinion editorial that said, parents, you have no control in schools. Because you live in a society where you pay your taxes and you voted people in, and they make decisions for you. So you can go to school and scream all you want to and protest. It doesn't make a difference. You're going to do what we say. That was the opinion. That was the article, and I was like, damn, it's true. If your kid is not doing anything at all, that's it. There's no need for you to be there. The only time we complain about parents not being involved is because the kid is acting up. But we never ask about. Most schools don't ask about why is the kid acting up. And then we never ask how come the parent just can't show up. That's how it's set up. Okay, so I just wanted to put that on there. And let me see here, another comment here from Brother Davis. Yes, urban kids, people have layers of issues, no father at home, not enough money, no relationships between parents and teacher built. And and I think, again, that's intentional. That's intentional. You drop your kid off and hope your kid behaves, and that's simple. There's nothing for us to talk about. And yes, we do the charades of, we have parent-teacher conferences. We tell you about your kid's grades and what your kid needs to do to do better. But that's it. We don't go beyond that ever, really. Unless it's a different. And listen, I'm talking about the typical urban school. We're not talking about the magnet schools or the specialized schools where that's different. But even still in those spaces, it's still the same philosophy. Drop your kid there. If your kid is doing what they need to do, then there's no issues. And if it's built in, but think about it. Your kid comes home, you say, how was school? School is fine. Okay, good, great. That's it. We're trained because that's what the parents did to us. How was school? School was fine. Okay, that's it. Generations. Because again, the intention is not to engage the school critically. Okay? The intention is for parents. If parents were trained to be critical thinkers and were allowed to be critical thinkers, then they'll come into school and ask so many more questions. But that's not the intention. It's very simple. Here's the subject that matter. This is what's happening in school, and that's it. Just be around. If we need you, be available. That's the relationship, right? So let me see here. So going back to the notes here. I talked about in my notes. I talked about historical context, and why things are the way they are. Because again, if I'm telling myself I'm not sending my kids to public school, but I need to know why. I had to do a deeper dive into it because it was such a foregone conclusion in my head, and I was like, damn, that's crazy. Because almost 20 years in the game, why would I make such a final or seemingly final decision, right? So historical context. I talked about enslavement and colonization, especially when I'm talking about public schools are failing our black children on purpose. Um, how do you educate someone without the context of who they are? And that's something that I've always thought wondered, because I was fortunate enough to have the earliest years of my education in Nigeria. So while I was there, school, at least at the time, had a heavy social studies, knowledge of self aspect to it. Understanding different cultures and the differences and things of that nature was something that was very, very important. And that's something that could be done in Africa because we're Africans, right? And depending where you went to school and what parts of Nigeria, you had it carried the tint and the hint of the culture of that region, you know, and which was understood. But here in America, what's the culture? What's the region? What's the culture? Schools are these cookie cutter, abbreviated Western ideals in the classroom. So you have children who are descendants of enslaved people, colonized people in these spaces where you're being fed the same content that was used to nullify and pacify your parents and your ancestors. You know, why do you think there's such an outrage about critical race theory? Such an outrage. Like, why would you teach black studies in schools? Like, you're not teaching white studies. And that also concerns me, because I want my child to also have a strong sense of self. And how is that? How does that happen within the public school system? You know, and it's one of those things where I don't know if it can really happen, because if you sit in a classroom with a multiracial of students in there, and you feed into one culture, how do you justify not feeding to other cultures that are in the classroom? Because you want every child to see themselves in the content, right? And then the other thing that I wrote down here is and I mean, in addition to that, I wrote down that as I was writing this, I was thinking about Bob Marley, and he talked about about mental slavery, and that's one of the things that does concern me. Like, how do you really truly unleash critical thinking, allow kids to really think beyond, again, this abbreviated westernized content of courses that doesn't really allow you to explore yourself or even see yourself in any of it, right? And then the other thing that I tapped into was and I reflected on is how during segregation, I mean, first of all, let's be honest here. Here in America, it wasn't just in America. It was and that's the thing, because when you're educated in America, you only get a very one-sided view of the world. What you're allowed to believe happened just here. As slavery was happening, as enslaved people were suffering here, colonized people were suffering in Africa. And I'm going to speak about those two spaces, but those are two spaces that I feel comfortable speaking about. I've spoken to my families, and I heard stories about escaping. I just found out recently that the man who had the name Njoku, that became the last name of my bloodline, he was kidnapped and escaped. Like, he fought the dudes off, and was escaped and made his way back to his village, through jungles. And I'm talking about back then. This is going in the 1800s, early mid 1800s, right? And it's funny because I'm like, I'll be honest with you, I wish there was a way to have a magic crystal ball you could look and see what really did happen in those spaces. Because again, a lot of the stories that we have is what's been told to us. I'm learning now that so much information that we just don't know, because we're that's being collected, and the truth that are out there that are just literally suppressed and hidden. So so you have that, you know, segregation. I mean, during slavery and colonization, where a lot of places it was illegal for you to be educated beyond being educated in Christianity, and even that was just oral. Learn these stories from the Bible, and that was it. And then there was one or two people within those communities who were black, who were allowed to be the learned ones who taught the stories. You know, to the point where you have to learn to read and write in secret. We all know here in America, punishable by death in a lot of places in the South. You know, and then after the Civil War and Reconstruction and then segregation, there was a proliferation of schools. You know, freedmen schools, and we taught ourselves and we educated ourselves. And yes, it wasn't equal because we didn't have the same resources, we didn't have the same money, we didn't have the same building, but we were still sending kids to college. How do I know this? The people who built Black Wall Street, where did in Oklahoma? They went to integrated schools? No, they didn't. They were educated in their communities, and then, you know, there were doctors, there were lawyers, there were people who were trained beyond laboring, who went to schools, then they came back, but their education was all homegrown, and prepared them to be able to go to college and things of that nature, right? So think about it. Back then, during segregation, you had all these wealthy black communities around the country that were eventually destroyed and burned down and literally flooded. But it was during segregation. Okay, now post-segregation, how many wealthy, independent black towns are there in this country? Please somebody put it in the chat. Somebody email me, let me know. Were there more during segregation? Or are there more now? I venture to argue there were more during segregation. And the argument I'm making is that, why is that? If now that we have public education and we have these spaces where there's so many more resources, why is there less wealth? That's something that I've questioned. You know, let me go back to the comments here real quick and see what again, listen, Curtis Davis, let me know when you want to call us and we could talk, okay? Because I would love to engage you in conversation. It says here, I agree, it's like warehousing when we talk about schools. Number one, see right here, number one skill, reading gives child ability to learn on. Yeah, and that's something that we need to really understand. Why is literacy skills very important? If you can't read, this is the weird notion that if at least with math you don't need to know how to read. That's a lie. If you can't read the instructions, how do you solve the math problem? The world is not just numbers and symbols out there. Often the problem needs to be solved in math is being presented in written word, right? That's how it is. Instructions are written out, so kids need to be able to read. Yes. That's critical thinking, but even worse, sometimes the public schools have agendas, and that's what I'm talking about. But it's not even the public schools; it's the system. The public schools are just the byproduct of the system. And if the school is lucky, they might have a strong leader, a strong team who are being subversive and do what they need to do for their children. But that is so far apart and in between. You're not gonna have. I probably said that phrase completely wrong. I apologize. My African brain and my English mouth don't ever quite connect the right way. But what I'm saying is, you're not going to find a lot of schools where that's the fact. You're just not. You're very welcome. He says, thank you for the 18 years of service as an educator. And you're very, very welcome. And I'm not done. I know, yes, I might not be in the school building, but I'm going to keep doing the podcast. What I'm doing right here is part of my legacy as an educator. It's just that now I get to speak freely and hopefully motivate those of you out there to engage the system, and maybe even create alternative systems for our children. Says here, let me see here. You need a strong identity, pride in self. Yes. Listen, it's hard for a child to learn if they don't have a sense of self. That's something that's very, very important. You have to have a sense of self. You don't have a sense of self. What are you learning exactly? How does it apply to you? Just learning information for the sake of information is the worst way to learn. I was successful as a student because everything that I learned, I saw how it could possibly connect to me in my future. Because my parents had a very clear goals for me, and everything I learned fed into those goals. It was very clear for me. And thankfully, I grew up in a Nigerian household with parents who were hardcore gangster. Like, nah, this is the path you're on. For not just for me, for all my siblings. But again, that was ingrained in our culture as Igbos. Education is paramount in our culture. See here. Mental slavery. And we have a new commentator, Diane Elizabeth Berardi. Pardon me if I said that wrong. Schools are failing all students. And listen, I'm assuming you're making a comment based on it's not just black kids. You're right. You're probably right about that. But my career has been primarily in urban schools with mostly students of African descent. So that's a space I can speak to. And then my two children are African children. So for me, and they're black children as well. So my concern is really about, and my concern is for all children, but my career has been primarily around black and brown children, primarily children of African descent, whether through slavery or through colonization. That's where I've spent my career. And so for me, that's what I speak to. Remember, this whole entire conversation, if you were here from the beginning, stems from the decisions I have to make for my children, for my two black children and what happens next. As a black man who is constantly concerned about their safety and their future, as my parents were as well. So please don't. I hope this is not a all lives matter type scenario, because again, at the end of the day, I'm speaking from my experience, and I made that very clear from the beginning. And let me see here. So I think you're calling in. Let me see. I can bring you in. And hello, Diane.
Hey.
Hello. So I didn't get to read your next comment, but since I was talking in reference to your first comment, let's talk.
Now, in general, schools are not just failing African American students, they're failing students, period. And parents need to be aware 34 CFR 300 is the federal education laws. And districts don't want you to know that. And as parents, we have the right to step in and supervise our children. We have the right, our children have the right to an active education. And yes, it's hard for us, to take that extra time, but we have the right, if we feel our children are not getting an education, we have the right to file those complaints at the state level and at the federal level so that our kids can actually get the education they deserve, whether they are African American, whether they are disabled. Like in my case, my daughter's disabled, and I myself am disabled. I have been dealing with this. I just moved to a state in the West, have not lived here for not even a year, and I've already filed 7 complaints at the school district level. And you know what? The school district is being forced to actually educate their staff and their teachers on how to teach students. You send your kid to school thinking these teachers already know how to teach. Well, obviously they don't. If I've shattered half the right side of my skull. I have less than 1% of my right temporal lobe, and I myself have filed complaints at the state level, and the state found the district incompetent.
So let me advocate for, again, like I said earlier, like I'm speaking as a black man in America, and I'm fortunate. I'm extremely fortunate. I've had a great career. I I did Ivy League and all that stuff. I ran schools. I ran schools primarily urban settings because by choice. Because I understood one thing about the black community. Schools have not been friends to black parents. They haven't.
No, they
Not even a
haven't.
little bit. And we're talking that's just schools. We're not talking about police. We're not talking about redlining. We're not talking about gentrification. We're not talking about all these things that literally been literally tearing apart black communities for decades. So as an educator, I've worked in spaces where I've seen the most abject poverty. Like I'm talking about like in the South Bronx and when I worked in Vegas, where you're just like, wow. But then it's not. But it's wild for everybody else. But I also grew up in that. When I came to this country, my family we lived in Watts in South Central LA. Like lullabies for me growing lullabies for me going to bed at night in LA was drive-bys. Like literally hearing drive-bys. So
I get
in a
it.
lot, yeah,
I'm coming from the projects of Boston.
okay.
So
So
I get it on that
yeah,
aspect.
but also there's a disadvantage as a black person in trying to get even to be taken seriously, you know. So especially now, especially if you're also undereducated yourself. A lot of my parents have diplomas. And I've had parents who literally went to school, graduated, have diplomas, and could not read. Have admitted to me, Mr. Njoku, this is my dirty secret. I can't read. And they're
Well,
like,
and
man, I went to school. So,
I
but
think
they're,
at that
but
point, I think at that point, that's where, you really get on Google, and that's where we're lucky that we have the internet nowadays, and you start looking up those 34 CFR federal education laws, because my nephews are mixed, and I know
how do you
when
do
I
that if how do you do that if you're undereducated and you're under salaried, meaning like I'm talking about literally maybe you don't have the internet access. I mean like I'm just like I wish I could show you like in the South Bronx where I've worked primarily most of my career. When I tell about people who don't even have internet access, when I talk about kids who've come to school and told me we don't have power in the house, you know, there's a world here in America that we don't talk about. You know, we don't really talk about like that next level of poverty, you know, and these kids tend to be all crowded in the same schools. So if they don't have teachers and school leaders who actually care, who actually want to advocate for them, then they go to places where those adults, the 80% of who are there, just do their job, babysit for the day, and go home. And these parents are like, okay, where do I even start? Like, where do I internet? I don't have internet access. I have parents who don't even have cell phones. Who've told me I can't afford a cell phone.
I
And that's
think
the
at
thing.
that point, I think at that point, it has to become a community issue. And
Yes.
that's why I love this. There's one thing, everybody thinks of, you know, when I think of Boston, and like I was in the projects in Boston, we would all get together and have like block parties, and you brought what you brought. If you could bring a bag of chips, cool, you brought a bag of chips. And we would discuss the children together. And yeah, I was a weird white lady, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. My sister, my kid right here is biracial. My nephews are biracial. It is what it is. But when it comes down to it, the school systems, when you get a big group of community together and fight it, and you say, look, my nephews would go to school and they would only get good grades because they wanted to stay on a sports team. Because in their mind, if they didn't play sports, they were never going to be successful black men. And as girls, as
Yeah.
women, my daughter, she's sitting here, she's like, Mom, I love me some Nicki. I love me some Nicki. Nicki Minaj. And she's only 7. And she walking around, she's like, that's right. I'm gonna. And I'm like, child, you want to be a doctor? You gonna be a doctor. I don't care. She go, I don't think so, Mom. You don't understand. That's not how it works. And I'm like, you know what? It's gonna be how it works. because as a community, we're going to lift each other up.
And
Period.
if I could add this, like again, when I say the misinformation, like for example, Nicki Minaj went to one of the best highly selective schools in New York City. So she wasn't just a kid on the block who was hustling mixtapes. Like she literally went, I believe she went to Stuyvesant, I believe, in Manhattan, and was an actual drama major. So like those are the things that, again, that we have our children who are thinking, I want to be Nicki Minaj, so I'm going to just, no, she studied. She is highly gifted and talented. And again, that is not an accident. One thing I want to say, and I appreciate you saying this, is about the block parties and the community. And unfortunately, most of the time, that is the outlier as far as communities who are able to come together and say, what do we do for our kids in our communities, in our school systems? And you need that trigger point. Like, who is going to be the one to start it? And one of the things that I can say, like I try to do as a school leader in my community, was like I had to have the courage in my school
To
system.
hop off, but it was wonderful talking to you, hon.
Yeah.
I hope to catch you
Thank you.
again. This was wonderful.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have an amazing evening, and I'll catch you again.
Yeah, and everybody write down 34 CFR 300. You
I
ever
put,
walk into a school?
please, did you put, okay, I see you put it in the comments. So I'm gonna share that right now on the screen.
Now, did
Right
you
here.
ever walk into a school and a teacher, an administrator, a staff ever tells you you cannot supervise, you cannot do all these things? You just quote that federal education law and you say, fuck you all. I'm sorry. Watch me walk into that damn school.
Thank you so much. Have an amazing evening. So again, this is my first time actually hearing about this law. And I'll tell you, in my school, I didn't need that law, because in my school, I welcome parents. Parents were welcome to come to the school. My thing was, of course, you can just walk in while and out, but we welcome parents in the school. We welcome parent volunteers. We wanted to make sure that kids knew that it was a partnership between the community, the parents, the families, period. That was the belief system. During orientation, I would tell parents all the time, if you're going to enroll your kid in my school, this will not be the last time I'm going to see you. But it also meant that I had the counselors and the guidance team who were willing to make sure that we knew what was going on with all our families, and it took some time to do that. But it got to the point where, between my parent coordinator, who was amazing, my guidance counselors who were amazing, and they would tell me, like, listen, Mr. So-and-so, they're going through this. Miss So-and-so, they're going through this. This family's going through this. And we were able to find ways to support them. Were we able to help everyone? No. But we knew what was going on. And again, Diane, you made a great point about, as far as that community agreement, that community connection is essential, tremendously essential. So so that was great. Thank you so much for calling in, Diane. And again, the 34 CFR 300, look that up. I'm gonna put it back on the screen again. If anybody's interested in that, again, I'm gonna look it up myself. This is my first time hearing about it. But again, in my school, parents were welcomed. And I wanted them there all the time. They went on field trips. They came in the classrooms. They sat in the hallways. They volunteered. But again, these are the things that are very, very important to make sure that our schools are running well, and it's a community thing. Not every school wants to do that. Not every school system allows that, because again, parents are meant to be shut out. And that's what I've seen over the course of my career. Let me see right here. So a couple more comments from Brother Davis. Everyone has a gift and talent. Let me see right here. High school, I had several white teachers who encouraged me to take AP courses, while my parents were not aware of my talents, didn't encourage. And again, that's part of having those 10% teachers who are like, listen, I do this because I care and I want you to be successful, versus those who are just like, listen, just do what you gotta do, go home. At the end of the day, go home. Like that's it. It's a very transactional relationship. And And again, he's in agreement about filing complaints. We don't do enough of that. And in future episodes, we're going to talk about that because I definitely want to get into more of the law and the things that you should need to understand about your school and how to operate within your child's school. Then right here, community connection, that is essential. Community, like community. But the question is, who's the trigger point? Who's the one who's going to set it off to re-establish community? You know, and a lot of times it's I'm sorry, it's the teachers, it's the administrator. You know, you have to create that space because a lot of times the people in your community might not even know where to start. They might not even feel that they have a voice to even engage in any way, shape, or form. And of course, open door policy for parents is very, very important. Open door policy is very, very important, but it has to be a very clear system and policy there with expectations. You know, you do not want to have open door period because again, remember I said with teachers, you have that 5% who adjust. This is what they were put on this plan to do. Then you have that 10% who adjust, amazing what they do, who just are like, I'm a lifer, this is what I'm going to do. Then you have the 80% who are just kind of like blah. But also in reverse, you have the 80% of parents who want to be part of what's going on in the school, but they don't know how to because often the school doesn't give them a way to be involved. Then you have that 80%, then you have the 10% who are just kind of like, you know, I'm burnt out. Then you have the 5% who are like, I don't care. And when you have open door policy, you gotta watch out for that 5%. But those are the ones who are upset and they come into the school and they blow up the school and they want to fight everybody. Okay? And again, I've seen it. Trust me, I've actually seen it, you know, many times over the course of the 18 years of me doing this. And I don't know, did I even have a conclusion to this? There is no conclusion. Not right now. But for me right now, the question is, how do we fix this? How do we shift the needle? How do we create a space where our kids can really be engaged in spaces that are meant for them to thrive, be critical thinkers, be analytical writers, to be passionate speakers, to question everything, and to be able to engage in intellectual discourse and discussions and like be part of shifting the world. This is what school's supposed to be. But that was not what school was intended for. So now we have to find a way to make that the intention, make that the reality. So it is 11:07. I am 7 minutes past over my time for this evening. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Do me a favor, share this content, come back again. I'm on Sundays at 10 p.m., Wednesdays at 10 p.m. Wednesdays I'm on for the Ivy League Hood Rats, me and my brother Archie Tyson, also a former public school principal. Then on Fridays is the Sneaker Principal podcast. So that is, you know, Uche talking about any and everything, education and even sometimes having guests on there. But what you heard tonight was the Public School Confidential, and strictly talking about this topic. What's happening in our schools, and for our parents and for our community members, how do we be part of making it work the way it should work and not the way it was intended to work. So let me see here. In closing, Curtis Davis says, I appreciate the conversation. The change starts here. Yes, it does. Great part of YouTube and internet, we have several tools to engage. And 100%, it's one of the things I want to do. I want to encourage people, use your voice, use your platforms, whatever your social media is, to start having these conversations. If you listen to this, it's because you have someone in your life that you love who's going through the school system and you're concerned, or you have someone that you love who went through the school system. Maybe it might have been you who came out not that great. You know, yes, I came out through the public school system, and it's by God's grace. Honestly, it's only really by God's grace that I'm even where I'm at right now. And it's funny because at first I would have told you it was all accidental for me even being here. But I'm realizing God put me through this path and brought me to where I'm at right now for a reason. And that's constantly is constantly unfolding and unpacking. But at least right now as I speak, I know the reason is to get you to think about how do we create a space for our children so they can be successful and go into the world, not to survive, but to conquer. And with that being said, thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate every one of you for being here. And till next time, all right? Be well. Peace.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.